To cut the binding channels, I'm going to be using the LMI binding cutting bit. It comes with an assortment of various size bearings that allow me to cut narrower or wider channels depending on my binding or purfling schemes. I'm going to mount the LMI binding machine to my table using the LMI mounting kit. With the LMI binding cutting bit in your router and the router attached to the base of the binding machine, you can adjust the depth of cut up and down with the macro adjust on your router. This moves the bit up and down in the base. To micro adjust your depth of cut, you can use the revolutionary micro adjust indexed rub collar. Just release the thumb lock and turn clockwise or counterclockwise to raise or lower the rub collar. This allows you to accurately dial in your depth of cut. Choose the appropriate bearing size to give you the width of the channel that you need for your binding and purfling scheme. You can use a couple of cutoffs from the binding and purfling placed up next to the bearing, and you can see where the edge of the cutter is and where the bearing is and see if that's what you need for the width of cut. And that looks pretty close for what I need. However, I'm always going to do a test cut. Never experiment on your project unless it's your friend's guitar and not yours. Once you think you have the correct bearing size, put this little screw in the bottom of it to hold the bearing in place. And it doesn't need to be very tight. In fact, I recommend just past finger tight. Use the Allen tool that comes with the cutter head to snug it up. Make sure that you don't over tighten. It's just snug. The LMI professional guitar carrier is used to hold the guitar as you make the channel cuts. I'm going to start by measuring the depth of the guitar about where the arms are going to hold it. So up here in the upper bout somewhere, and this is going to be on this guitar about 94 millimeters. On the back side of the guitar where the lower arms are going to hold the guitar, it's coming in at about 100 millimeters. So I have a difference between the upper and lower bouts and the body depth of about 6 millimeters. Before I place the carrier on the guitar, I'm going to go to the lower bout stanchions, the ones with the longer arms, and adjust them so they're at the same height. To do that, loosen your thumb knob, and here's your micro adjust screw right here. You want the height from the top of the traveler to the top of the stanchion to be the same on both arms. In general, lower is better. So I'm going to set this one up at about 20 millimeters. And then I'm going to lock it in place with the thumb knob. On the upper bout arms, I want the travelers to be 20 millimeters plus the difference in my body depth. In this case, on this guitar, 26 millimeters. So I'm going to loosen my thumb knob and measure from the top of the traveler to the top of the stanchion. I'm going to lower it down until I get the measurement that is the difference between the upper and lower bout. And in this case, it's about 6 millimeters on this guitar. So I lower this down to 26. And then I lock it in place with the thumb knob. Before I cut the binding channels on the guitar, I'm going to put a wash coat of shellac on there. And there's a couple of reasons for doing that. One, it helps keep the top clean. This is a messy job. You're going to get glue on your fingers, you get fingerprints of glue on the top. We don't want that. So shellac will help that clean up easier. Second, we're going to use binding tape to help pull the binding in and tape it in place. And sometimes as you're peeling the binding tape off, little fibers will come out of your top. The shellac helps seal all that in, and your tape comes off easier without getting the fibers pulled up out of the top. A third reason for putting shellac on your top before cutting your channels is that sometimes the binding cutting bit will leave little fuzzies around the edge. So you tend to get a cleaner cut if you've sealed everything with shellac. Ideally, you want to do this before you cut your channels. If you forget, it can be done afterwards. Just don't get any shellac in the channel because the glue won't stick to the shellac. And it's just a light wash coat. I'm using a 1 pound cut of shellac flakes that I've mixed myself. You can use spray shellac if you like. Mostly we're worried about the perimeter of the guitar, not the middle. Just remember that. Don't get glue all over your hands and come sticking it in the middle of the soundboard there. I'm going to start by cutting the top bindings. So I'm going to place my guitar on my bench face down. In other words, the side that I want to cut first is facing down. I'm then going to take the LMI Professional Guitar Carrier and place it over the back. The shorter arms go in the upper bout, the longer arms in the lower bout. With the carrier on the guitar, slide the arms until the stanchions are flush against the side of the guitar. And also, the carrier needs to be resting on the guitar. I'm now going to take the elastic cord that came with the carrier, place it around the arms and on the stanchions, and tighten it to apply light pressure so that the stanchions are pulled up snug against the side of the guitar. Next, I'm going to center the bass on the guitar and then come in and tighten the 16 screws, starting with the outside screws and going in. You don't want to over tighten these, just snug them up. You can now release the elastic cord and remove it. And carefully turn your guitar over and place it on your bench. In theory, the height of the guitar at the butt and the neck end should be the same because we compensated it on the height of our travelers here. However, it's always a good idea to check it. If you need to micro adjust the height, loosen your thumb knob and use the adjuster. One of the keys to a successful binding job is making sure that your channels are cut properly. In other words, 90 degrees or square. That's why it's important that the guitar is level on both ends. It's even more important on a more pronounced radius, like on the back. The LMI Professional Guitar Carrier has the micro adjust, allowing this adjustment to be made quickly and easily. To drive the business end of the tool, the LMI cutter, what I'm going to use is the Bosch laminate trimmer. The reason why I like the Bosch laminate trimmer is because it has a speed control on top of it. Speed control goes from numbers 1 to 6. I like to dial it into about number 3, which is about half. And this runs about 20,000 RPMs. The reason why I like to run at lower RPMs is it saves the bit. The number one enemy of a cutting head is heat or friction. And running at a lower speed will help keep the friction and the temperature down. Also, every router has a little bit of run out in the spindle, and running at a lower speed reduces vibrations and lowers the pucker factor for me, the operator. With the guitar in the guitar carrier and dialed in so that I have the correct height on both ends of the guitar, my router is dialed in into the bass, I have the bit in, and I have the bearing on that's going to determine the depth or the width of cut. I've also determined the depth of cut. Now, unless I'm working on my friend's guitar, I'd be a fool if I didn't do a test cut. So for my test cut, what I'm going to use is a piece of MDF. Don't use end-grain rosewood. It will wear your cutter out sooner. To do my test cut, I'm going to place my test board, my piece of MDF, on my guitar, which is in the guitar carrier. I'm then going to turn the router on, lift it up, bring the guitar and sample board over. I'm then going to bring the router down and let the rub ring adjuster sit on my test piece. I'm then going to engage my test piece into the cutter. I'll do a small test piece, I'll pull it out, and I'll then check it to make sure that the binding and purfling scheme that I have is fitting the channel that I've cut. So here's my test piece and here's my test cut. I'm going to take a piece of my purfling, a piece of my binding, place it in the test cut, and to me it looks like I'm just a little bit proud. I can actually go a little bit deeper. To adjust it so that I'm cutting farther down into my test piece here, I need to adjust the rub collar. It also appears that I've cut too far into my sample piece. I need a narrower channel. So to adjust that, I need to change the bearing. A larger bearing will give me a shallower or narrower channel. So after changing the bearing and also adjusting the depth of cut with the rub collar, I made another test cut I'm flush on the side, and on the top I have just a micro skosh above the top of the sample board. And that's about the way I like to see my bindings go in. Flush on the side and just a little bit on the top. That way I don't have all the fun taken away. I want to be able to scrape something down. There's a secret to cutting your binding channel when it comes to the direction of cut. For example, your cutter head is cutting like this. And if you come in here and start going this way, you're climbing up into it, and it could chip there. So you want to be running downhill. So the trick is to come in at the widest part of the upper and lower bout. For example, if I come in here, I want to travel this way, and then back up and go this way, or go this way and go this way. It doesn't matter. Then come in at the widest part of the upper bout and go this way and this way, or this way and this way. It doesn't matter. When you get all done, if you want to make a final trip around, you can. So once your binding channels are cut, carefully turn the guitar over again, loosen the screws. You can now remove the guitar carrier from the guitar and set it up again to make the back binding cut.